INEC overreached, acted. INEC had no duty, no directives from the court to remove anybody. INEC did it. It would appear from presumption now, not evidence, that INEC was actually script, and it's okay. A asks for, Mr. X asks for A, Y asks for B. Okay, I will not give Y, I will give B. I'll clear all of you. That was the logic of, it looks like contrived. Somebody cooked it up. These guys played to their hand, asked for this guy to be restrained. INEC's okay. This will not say, INEC, remove everybody. INEC, it's just like the example we had with Solomon and the baby that died, and the woman who didn't have a real claim says, you know what, cut this baby. I say, let me cut it. So that's what INEC has done. So, okay, since people say we shouldn't allow Rafiu as people, and other people said we should remove you guys. Okay, you know what to do? Neither Rafiu nor you, we have removed you guys. No, I think it was really, it sounds like a script hatched by opposition, by a leading party, to stop the momentum that, for now, is on the side of the opposition party.
All right, welcome to Naija Unfiltered, a SYMFONI podcast. And our guest on today's edition of the program is a former chairman of Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, a policy strategist, law and governance expert. Professor Sam Amadi is our guest today. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you. I love Dr. Sam Amadi.
Okay, Dr. Sam, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, there is a case in court now, the Federal High Court, filed by Nafiu Bala Gombe, who says he never resigned. It was said that he resigned in 2025, but he's saying now that he never resigned and wants to be the automatic chairman of the party. If he is right or he is wrong, what does he say about the incumbent, how they came to power?
Okay, so there are two ways to look at it. First, you can look at it as how did it is a process. There was a merger or there was a takeover. We can all debate whether the process was smooth or not. Okay, whether it was maybe something ought to have been done. That's possible. But two questions are clear. One is, did he resign? Okay, let's assume he didn't resign as a claim, because letters are now on the open that show that, except there's allegation of forgery, which will be a criminal case. But if there's no allegation of forgery, there's a clear letter where he resigned. And if that's the case, then he has no case. But assuming he didn't resign. So the question is, what next? What about it? So he's the vice chairman. He claims to be the chairman, that he didn't resign his vice position. His claim is that he wants to be the chairman. Okay, let's assume he's the chairman. So it's not a case of determining between him and David Mark who's the chairman. It doesn't destroy the credibility of the NWC itself, which is a product of a NEC that INEC supervised, which nobody has challenged the credibility or the validity of that NEC. So the question is, people claim to have resigned. Somebody claimed I didn't follow them, which means the voluntary resignation doesn't affect me. But the party decision-making process is NEC and convention. And NEC now says, whether resign or not, NEC says all the members are dissolved. So let's assume they resign. They say you guys are dissolved. It's okay. You don't have to go back and say that NEC decision is faulty, because the NEC decision dissolving the party is an illegal, legal position, authoritative, because the constitution of party says the highest organ is convention followed by NEC. So if he now says I don't resign, okay, you are still vice chairman. Okay, even if you are the chairman, it does not negate. So what ultimately, there's nothing in the decision of the Court of Appeal, from what I read as a lawyer, that warrants that INEC would take the action they took yesterday. And even if, the point is not about who ultimately becomes the chairman, is you have rendered this party, leaderless, created a shadow of doubt around its activity. And this happens at the time that a major shift happens in favor of the party. Kwakwanso, who is a very powerful political actor, joined a couple of days ago. Today was reported, scheduled for the governor of Bauchi to join. And then the night before, you hit this bazooka to just create confusion. So the timing, INEC, this has been over 3-4 weeks. You are part of this process. This has been served on you. Why today? Why now? This matter because there's an aspect of public perception. And that's why I say the history of the past, where you were used by the ruling party, and always be used by ruling parties, whether PDP or APC, to undermine election, suggests that you now act with greater sensitivity and caution. So even if INEC feels that they needed to vacate that, recognition, they probably waited a few days. They probably, take. So the fact that you acted now, acted the manner you acted, and no order directs INEC to take any action in this matter. None. Unlike the one of Labour Party, where INEC was directed and they didn't even remove the name. So you would say that, like judges say, that justice ought to be done and sin to be done. So in this case, what's the public perception of your action? So let's assume that this Joash Amupitan is a very holy man. He has never no phone call with Tinubu or with the chairman of the party, APC. This is all timing, perception. Are you not supposed to be a lot more thorough, sensitive, kind of deliberative and kind of cautious to say, look, what's the overall impact of these actions on the party? And again, I've been arguing that INEC as a regulator, forget lawyers writing letters, you need to talk to the parties and provide more information. So look, what we are doing, this is how we want to do it, this is what we expect to happen, this is how this will affect. The party's members have scheduled to have convention. What are you doing? You should be the one who go to the court to say, we need certainty. Courts, we need to make sure these guys are on the ballot. That's the job of INEC.
All right. Someone argued that what INEC did in removing David Mark and Aregbesola from their portal, and if you like, the NWC, is a judicial overreach, given the position of the Court of Appeal that they should maintain the status quo. What do you think?
Well, the purpose of status quo antebellum would be status quo before even, because the NEC, I told you, was July 29. These issues arose September. So status quo would be keep this as they are, which is that the ESCO has resigned. Now, status quo, also the decision came after INEC had already recognized them. So that would be, don't do any further thing. In fact, the status quo will favor David Mark, because they are the people already in by the time the matter status quo was, what the court said. And what the court didn't give it. This is like, courts just say, you guys, why, shoot your sword. Why we don't do something nasty that will change the configuration of this case. So everybody stay back. The court did not ask INEC to take an action, positive action, to remove somebody who already was on the status quo. So they are right that INEC overreached, acted. INEC had no duty, no directives from the court to remove anybody. INEC did it. It would appear from presumption now, not evidence, that INEC was acting a script, and it's okay. A asks for, Mr. X asks for A, Y asks for B. Okay, I will not give Y, I will give B. I'll clear all of you. That was the logic of, it looks like contrived. Somebody cooks it up, these guys play to their hand, asks for this guy to be restrained. INEC's okay. This will not say, INEC, remove everybody. INEC, it's just like the example we had with Solomon and the baby that died, and the woman who didn't have a reclaim says, you know what, cut this baby. I say, let me cut it. So that's what INEC has done. So, okay, since people will say we shouldn't allow Rafiu, Nafiu as people, and now people say we should remove you guys. Okay, you know what to do. Now that I feel you, we have removed you guys. No, I think it was really, it sounds like a script hatched by opposition, by the ruling party, to stop the momentum that, for now, is on the side of the opposition party.
What do you make of INEC saying that let the judicial process continues while they delete, whereas we've seen in time past when such processes are also ongoing in the court, but the NWC or those involved are also allowed without INEC deleting them from their portal? Why is this one a special case?
Because INEC wants to delete this for strategic purpose of the ruling party. That's that's only that makes sense to me. I mean, that, like you said, why should they bother? Okay, you guys are in court, be in court until you get a positive order. Tell us what to do. In the meantime, status quo remain. And then we go and monitor the elections that they are doing. So if the court now finally says it's wrong, we will vacate it. So INEC loses nothing. That's the point. There's nothing that requires INEC to act. Let's assume at the end of the day that Rafiu or Nafiu wins the election, wins the case, and the court says that the Mark leadership was fake or illegal, or irregularly consulted, therefore their actions in staging convention is invalid. What does INEC lose? Do you get the point? You know, whatever. So it's gratuitous, like I said in my interview elsewhere. I said it's at best it's a gratuitous, at worst it's a malicious intervention.
At what point does INEC's neutrality becomes complicit? The way they are going now, this case can drag on, knowing our courts, and especially making reference to what former President Jonathan said, it is easy to wake a man who is sleeping as against the man who is pretending to be sleeping. So if INEC in this instance is working towards an answer, at what point does their neutrality become complicit?
Well, my own view is that that's the grand plan of APC. APC campaign strategy is first to avoid competition. I mean, I'm not sure they are governing well. I think they are failing on that indicator. I'm not too sure that President Tinubu is strong enough to campaign rigorously, especially against maybe a youthful, energetic guy like P2B, assuming he becomes. I mean, the last time P2B dragged him, like silly across the country, he couldn't even show up for some of the television shows. I would presume that it'd be worse. It's not ready to really go down, ground zero and start explaining the failure of the government. So their big strategy is to make sure there is no big competition. And that's why effort was made to get the governors in. And the idea was that it will create a sense of fait accompli. It weakens, everybody say, oh, why bother? The ruling party has 36 governors, so what are they fighting for? It has not worked. The momentum is still with the opposition. People are angry. People are, if you look at registration, if you look at social media, if you look at opposition is growing, not because they are organized, not because they have, what it takes. Just people basically feel the country is going the wrong way. If you ask people, if you do a lot of polling and say, do you think the country is going the right or wrong way? My guess would be like 80% of Nigerians, 80 would say the country is going the wrong way. If you ask them that, do you think that your life is better or worse? They would say 80 to 90 would say worse off. If you ask people, do you feel more secured in this country now than before? 90 people say we feel insecure. If you ask them, do you think that the ruling government is doing well or bad? 80 to 90 will say they are not doing well. So all these indicators show what them. It's constant everywhere in the world. The problem is without that chance to express how they feel. The idea of voting is voter preference. But then sometimes that preference is bottled because of the structure of elections themselves. So the APC playbook starts with chapter 1, which is don't allow real competition. It comes many ways, destabilize the parties so that they don't in fact, at a point, from legal rules, from the Electoral Act itself, it's called that many candidates will be caught off guard. Their candidates will be illegal. Think about all the rules now that they are bringing in. Tomorrow, don't be surprised, the National Assembly will pass an amendment. We saw the one proposed to say you can't join two parties. What does that mean? To put those parties. So everything is being done to satisfy chapter 1, which is don't allow competition. It might mean the restaurant ADC, which could be the next point. So if we can't remove the leadership, cut off the party. So people are stranded. Last minute, Kwakwanzo, P2B, Atiku Abubakar, we just discover that they are just stranded. The people will compete with one Musa and one Onyema in ZLP, in PDP, in Feta Company. The chapter 2 of their rule book then is, if there's still a competition, maybe a P2B emerges somewhere miraculously along the line, or Atiku Abubakar still emerges, what do we do? Then rig the election. And so that's why they worked very hard. They were very resistant to the press to create that safeguard of real-time, so that there is a possibility that fake results will be received. And like I said, I don't see the INEC chairman. I'm not going to put my defense line on the INEC and INEC chairman. No, they will fail. The profile does not tell me that. So that's why our work is to protect INEC, to press INEC, to make sure INEC doesn't get caught up in this chapter 1 and chapter 2 of the APC game plan. So is there a point where so-called neutrality becomes dangerous? Yes. I mean, when INEC dribbles itself, dribbles or get dribbled into where it's now clear that maybe no candidate is emerging, because either by rules, either by order from courts, and by the way, everything INEC is doing wrong, or anything INEC would do, or anything that happened to an election negatively, at the heart of it is the court, that in my view, SIM to the other Nigeria has captured. The court will give INEC the slam. You know, they give in basketball. They will give them the ball, they set it up properly for them to slam. INEC will now slam it. They will give an order that INEC will now purportedly to implement. They will do. So you're going to see that, dual striker force of INEC at the court that will damage the election and help the APC rule book to come to pass. My concern is, look, the best thing we can have in Nigeria is a free and fair election that sustains or at least prevent the specter of coups that have been happening in West Africa. We just sit with some sense of presumption that, maybe because we have oil money we can share, that we're not going to be overrun by chaos or collapse or violent conflict or even military coup that succeeds. I don't have that faith. I think that the system is so fragile. I think we're almost like overrun by militia. We are struggling with terrorists. We are struggling with insurgents locally, people who are angry with the country, like Nigerians, whether in the southwest, whether in the southeast, whether in the north. We are struggling with poor economic performance. We are struggling with an elite that is criminal in their greed. So if you put all this together with a very terrible election, I'm not sure we'll survive. So my prayer is that somehow INEC will wake up from sleep, or wake up from pretense of being asleep, and really pull itself to say, look, the first guarantor of fair and fair election in West Africa is that the electorate of the INEC will be against the ruling party. If INEC is in bed with the ruling party, which is a phenomenon that's common, you will never have a fair and fair election.
What do you make of having an Atiku and Obi, Kwakwanso, Amechi on the same platform, and all of them almost being frozen out by the actions and inactions of INEC? Are we likely to watch an opposition that will just wake up and discover that they've been surgically dismantled by a compromised institution?
And that may likely happen. And again, see, it's supposed to be a great thing to have these great leaders in one opposition party. We always wanted to have, like in Senegal, if you have a ruling party that's strong, then you have an opposition party that brings together everybody to fight and you win. And that's good for democracy. So when we talk about opposition, it's not like we love the people in opposition. It's that a strong opposition is good for democracy. That creates that competitiveness, which is at the heart of democratic theory. Nigerian politics now, since 2023, has become a joke. It's difficult to know. I mean, laughable. P2B was a Labour Party did well. According to him, they fought him, destroyed the party. We don't want you. And people were laughing at P2B and said, he couldn't manage party. He couldn't manage his Labour Party. Now, what do you say to David Mark and Atiku and others who are now in ADC? Do you get what I'm making? So it wasn't about P2P. There was a submarine, a strike force that's going about striking down wherever you see, whatever that strike force is. So Labour gone down. PDP was thinking around maybe bringing back Jonathan or bringing back P2P. Yeah? PDP gone down. ADC now looks like it's going down, or they're hitting them down again. So the notion that these parties are failing because their leaders are poor managers is wrong. There are several instances. How can suddenly all the parties begin to fail? We didn't have those failures in previous elections from 1999. APP did not fail. There was no interminable leadership crisis, even though PDP was in power. PDP was in power. APC, of course, you see people drift towards the ruling party because of payouts. But the party had stability. They were not fighting, endless fight. Somebody doesn't come up and say, I'm the chairman, and I'm this, I'm that. 100 cases, and then injunction, uncertainty. When we now saw ACN came into 2014, APC rather, to challenge PDP, Jonathan did not send people to challenge the leadership. Nobody came and said they were a chairman. The party grew, the party worked hard, and was able to defeat PDP. But today, in 2023, from 2023 to today, what we now see is that all the managers of parties are now incompetent. So is it a happenstance, coincidence, that from Tinubu's era, party leadership management in Nigeria became incompetence writ large? So no party is able to organize itself. For the first time, we're now seeing claimants of chairmanship. We've now seen neck of parties dissolved. We're now seeing PDP has their own neck, PDP had two neck, different BOT. These things have to be explained. They cannot be the result of a sudden wave of incompetent party management. The people who are running this party were people who are running the parties before. The three of us, they're the same guys. They're the same people. I don't know, all these guys are politicians. David Mark were Senate President 2 times. So when did Amechi, who is now in the ADC, was a campaign lead for APC when they won the election twice? Is that not correct? So how did they just become incompetent? That all the parties have to fail. All the parties now have strong, visible claimants to alternative authority. All of them have a different BOT. People are claiming, people come from the woodwork, and they're now BOT, and they now get to one court. And interestingly, the judges who give the decisions are like this, accountable. If it's a motor shop, it's Abdul Malik, it's over 3 or 4 people that give these judgments all the time.
All right, let's look at David Mark. If you look at his national stature, like you rightly pointed out, a former 2-time Senate president, look at his military background, the way INEC deleted his name like a jigger on the leg. Does it worry you, the kind of election we are heading towards 2027?
What I see from a social science analytics, not an interest, is chaos, rigging, incredibility. Because I think 2 things are happening. One is time. Time for doing everything short. 2 is the highest level of desperation and manipulative leadership and very big disdain for rules or orderliness in politics. I mean, when the president is called Jagaban, maybe that's the price we pay. It means it's a generalissimo in the art of taking hostages in politics. And the first hostage is INEC now. The court, I think, is a hostage. So it worries me. It's not even about David Mark, who is a well-established guy, but also about the possibility that we might get to where, all the incidents or features of democratic elections are over. And then, we get an outcome that further complicates our problem. I'm always concerned about development. Election is a means to an end. Yes, election is an end. People exercise their rights, whether good or bad, but it's also a means to an end. It's a means of political change, of stability, of development. And so my worry is that we are getting a politics that undermines and underserves all these critical values.
Can you take us through all that transpired, or some of the things that transpired that led you into saying that the INEC chairman, all he said, does not inspire hope and confidence?
It happened a couple of weeks ago, but I just instituted it yesterday. And I was sent, I think David Mark was supposed to be part of the panelists with some of the chairman of APC and Labour Party and a couple of other chairmen. But for some reason, he has a personal respect for me and liking. He asked that I should stand in for him, not as a member or a leader of ADC, but personal, respect that I should go. So I got there. Now, when I got there and I listened to the chairman of Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, what I didn't see, okay, let me start what I saw. What I saw was like somebody who didn't quite understand the landscape before he came. Now, this is an INEC that overpromised, that had very high civic society support, INEC that had built up reputation and had some innovations leading to 2023 elections. So, and the civil society fought for electoral reform, and they got what they wanted. They got a clear language on electronic transmission of election. They got a clear language that they themselves will decide the mode. And INEC went ahead and decided the mode, which is direct transmission from polling units to the IREF, which is the INEC result viewing portal, and of course the INEC electronics, storage, if you like, collection center. And this INEC inexplicably failed to do that and went to court to say, well, what we promised that we're going to do and backed by a regulation, we are free to walk away from it. And the court somehow said, blah, 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 yes. Now, from being a new chairman in that context, their first challenge is to inspire back confidence, to give a clear declaration of integrity. Because what failed in INEC in 2023 was not technology. It wasn't logistic. It was integrity to the finishing line. The INEC chairman then, Professor Mahmood, could have been a hero, but that means perhaps APC would have been defeated. The legislative election was transmitted. The presidential election could not, because they gave their people bad passwords that didn't fit in. And after a delay about 4-6 hours, we saw results coming from, notably River State, badly mutilated. So those results cannot validly sustain a declaration of election, even in the worst banana country. I mean, Russia does a better job with electoral integrity than what we had. North Korea clearly does a better job. So an INEC chairman coming in this context would speak to the country reassuringly. But one of the things he heard, so what I didn't hear was that tone of, we know the problem. The problem is integrity failure. We've come with the solution. We are going to be boldly, courageously honest. He didn't say that. What I heard also was some kind of dissimulation, kind of talking about, there are many tests of, we can't get 100%. I mean, when people start by telling you, nothing is perfect, they're just being criminal or stupid. We talk about perfection. There is a clear benchmark for credible election. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. So when I just say nothing is perfect, that's not the point. We know nothing is perfect. Even our concept of perfection is imperfect. What we are saying, there are basic things that have to be done, not rocket science. India does election, Ghana does election. So you start by saying it's not going to be perfect, but there are indicators. What are indicators? you talk about logistics. That's not the. If you look at Nigerian electoral conflicts going to court, not just about logistics. Oh, ballot box didn't come by 9, it came 12. People don't mind. They vote. What always matters is after voting, the integrity of the count and the integrity of the results. And those are fixable. And this guy didn't, upon all the briefing he got, he came there and spoke in a very, in my view, timid, not reassuring. I didn't see courage. I didn't see understanding of the crisis. I didn't see the commitment to fight back against what has become an industry and a cabal of electoral malpractice. So if I was going to put hot money, bet on the outcome from what I heard from him, I concluded in my mind that this guy, except the parties themselves, Nigerian citizens themselves, fight this fight. I don't see Joash Amupitan with whatever credibility he may have as a scholar, as a human being. I'm not saying it's corrupt, but I'm saying I didn't see a man who would hold the line against this invading army of election riggers who want to be in power. And in a third world country like Nigeria, across Africa, you can see the same pattern. Desperation for power, very desperate calculation for power, a very weak and oftentimes beaten and poor civil society. So the electoral umpire becomes just a scaffold for them to rig election.
Was it also why you said that this election was going to be worse than what we've had? And that this INEC, we can't trust this election is going to conduct? Yes.
Okay, now look at it. By this time last election, we had clarity who are the political parties. Today, we don't have clarity which are the parties going to stand. Apart from APC, you don't even know whether ADC will be registered, rumors and some signals we are seeing. You can wake up and say, oh, wow, ADC shouldn't have been registered. Right? You don't know. By this time, last electoral cycle, it was clear how the primaries will happen. Today, it's not clear to you. They talk about direct primary and consensus, but we saw the convention. Which mode was used? Was it direct primary or consensus? You can't know. One, nobody said, these are the list of candidates for those elective offices. This is where they signed off, because the law says you must, each of the aspirants who are cleared, will sign off a consent for consensus. Nobody said. You hear in the APC primary where those who said they didn't give us form, we bought for, were excluded. So the rules are not clear. The electoral law says direct primary. It says parties must have electronic register. Nobody has verified. Parties are still struggling. In fact, the IPAC is saying you shouldn't control us. You shouldn't directly prescribe for us how to elect them. It's against internal democracy. So at this point, there's no certainty, there's no clarity. You don't even have the time. INEC is struggling to fit everything into a very small time space, whereas INEC itself has no managerial capability to really do the things that ought to be done. And just yesterday, INEC says, you know what? All voters should line out and go and be revalidated. Isn't this speaking to you about chaos? So you come and tell us that, oh, these voters have been taken out of the voting. In fact, some people are alleging, assuming a voting strength of opposition, maybe Northern Nigeria or maybe Lagos or maybe anywhere. You go and freeze out voters. You did biometrics. The idea of biometrics is a permanent evidence of validity. Is that how you do few months to elections come in January? From February, you push to January in response to Muslims, or few Muslims actually, who claim that, Ramadan is not a time to vote, which doesn't make sense because in Muslim countries, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia, and every other places, they do voting. Voting is not manual labor. Voting does not violate, but you consider, okay? So it's not January. Today is, so we have less than 9 months. Technically, this is the 3rd month. So this is the 4th month. So you have less than, worst case, less than 10 months for the polls. And you're asking voters to all go out with INEC that has very, very, inefficient operations, they're going to revalidate to be voters. What necessitates that? Why is it necessary to do this? Again, you just sent a memo to political parties. You want to come and do verification of parties again. Meanwhile, you've not even defined your rules. You just gave a draft rule for regulation you want to enact, draft, just a couple of days ago to the parties. You've not done consultation, probably will not do. So the point I was trying to make is this, that everything suggests to me that this will be the most bungled election. Just yesterday, he told us that ADC, the leading opposition party, has no leadership, neither nor, okay? And they ought to have a convention in less than a week or so, okay? They ought to have a primary before May 30, to have, in fact, May 20, to have their president and other aspirants. And today, they don't have any leadership. And then you have a case building in court where there's no finality, where judges are playing ping pong. So what is I looking for? Some Hercules will come and uplift all this. There are many balls in the air that 2, 3, 4, there are about 20, 30 balls on the air dangling. So you should expect that at least 5 of those 20 balls will come to the ground.
Do you see the hand of the ruling APC in all of this, trying to either pressurize INEC, or INEC is just acting a script on their own?
The reasonable thing to say is, for example, PDP, a leading opposition party. So why are they in turmoil? Anyhow, I caught it. The principal officer of this government says their party must not produce a candidate to challenge a ruling party. I mean, this is never heard of. So what logic suggests that the president's main hitman, main guy, because the FCT minister is, by definition, the landlord, even of Mr. President. So president, the guy who oversees the president's territory, is, no matter how you look at it, a very important cabinet member. And he tells his party leaders that, anyhow I got it, we will not have a candidate to challenge my principal. So PDP, after that statement, PDP went into a terminal crisis. Today, PDP that is alive is the one that the minister controls and that says our job is no vacancy till 2031. Labour Party we saw everything was going on, and suddenly we saw a kind of friendship between Abure, the guy who is claiming ownership or leadership, and the same minister. We saw fancy pictures, smiling faces. Then court says, throw this guy out. It took months for INEC to respond. INEC refused at a point when they grudgingly removed his name, they put his signature. But a few days ago, last week, they said there's a court order, INEC immediately enforced it. And today, the leading opposition, you are telling them that there's no leadership. So, yes, it might look to say INEC is failing, but essentially, look, the tragedy of democratic elections in Africa and Nigeria primarily now is that the electoral commission is supported by a president who has all incentives to be in power. And few presidents don't push that envelope too far. We saw Jonathan, perhaps his members regretting that appointed somebody who showed some kind of courage against him, maybe because the agenda aligned then, not one's power. That chairman's from the north. People say, oh, it was actually not really integrity. This is like, a guy who is not going to accept this guy. But the president appoints the commission. There's a story put out by a leading professor of law in this country who says that this guy signed his letter of resignation. So, if you understand African politics, an electoral umpire appointed by a president will most likely not be independent. And when that electoral umpire is dealing with a government that has shown capacity and recklessness in capturing state institutions, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the independent regulator for election. So what we're seeing today is that many independent analysts and who are courageous will tell you that the Nigerian state, the state capture index is high in Nigeria. The ruling party has, in my view, penetrated these institutions, and the INEC now has a responsibility to show by its conduct that it's not doing these things to favor the ruling party. For the first time in our history, we've seen competitive elections, we've seen opposition parties survive, fail election maybe, but survive. Buhari, just 8 years of President Buhari, APC, we didn't see the opposition party go into engineered crisis of leadership that we're seeing, the kind we're seeing now. And I've given you two instances where the minister played role, PDP. It is also in the political system where the minister of FCT tells the governor of Bauchi, I'll put fire under you. And then, like they say, all cry in the night and the child died in the morning. And then, so basically, you would say that, look, this, whoever is responsible, they are engineering this electoral system to end, like I said, chaotic, terrible, and utterly rigged. I've seen nothing so far in the way the judiciary and INEC is going about their business that suggests to me that the scenario that will emerge Monday morning after the election is a scenario of credibility, trustworthiness, and calm after. No. I see chaos, I see violent disputation, I see a terrible election that might lead to, if not the collapse of democracy in Nigeria, but definitely a major dent on democracy and accountability.
How do you think we can retrace our steps? Because right now, what we've seen is that INEC has frozen out ADC as it is currently. And then also banned the leadership, deleted them from their portal, banned them from attending congresses. Is INEC doing their job, or are they being weaponized to just cut off the head of the opposition? And how can we retrace these steps?
My sense is that INEC has been thoroughly corrupt even before now. I mean, that's no doubt about it. INEC is a very corrupt institution. That's, if you look at every index of integrity, INEC scores very low. We've seen it in many ways. You look at even some of the cases. I mean, why would INEC conduct the election, not the delivered transmission, and then go to court and say, well, court, our defense is, we don't even bother. It's our choice not to. I mean, that's it's an organization that lacks credibility. What a credible organization would do is to come and say, this is why we failed. And then the court will take an opinion. But you go there and says, we failed. We're not even supposed to protect our votes. We're not even supposed to trigger our most reliable mechanism for credibility of elections. So INEC is a very corrupt institution. Therefore, I think that the ruling party would easily, and probably is easily, using a corrupt organization. And I've said again, Joash Amupitan does not strike me. He has no pedigree of somebody who fights the system. What INEC needs now is somebody, another electoral system needs somebody who's independent-minded, whose appointment is independently procured, and who can stand against a clear political will to undermine democracy. And again, back to the solution. Stepping back from the precipice is first and foremost a national acknowledgement that democracy is at risk in Nigeria. This is beyond partisanship. This is not about APC. I mean, I could care less if the ruling party wins election, even though I think a ruling party that has not performed. Democracy is built on competitiveness, as Professor Skumpita said it many years ago. He said democracy is the prospect that voters will vote you out and you go home. So if you don't perform, you go home. That's what it is about. So I would like always that after a government is there 8 years, if their scorecard does not show up, so someone else should replace them, because that creates incentive for people to do well. But beyond that, I couldn't care more who wins the election than I care that elections are themselves competitive. So if you look at West Africa, the tragedy of democracy decline, as people say, some argue that it's not democracy that has failed, it's actually politics that's failing in West Africa. It's actually, liberal democracy. Whatever we argue, the point is that the people come to trust the votes less. The politicians come to capture institutions that determine election, and then they create fait accompli that leads to underperformance in governance and ultimately violent overthrow of government. So when Nigeria, look, we are dealing in a shadow of a reported coup. Is that not correct? So we had a story where they said there was a plan for a violent coup. Some guys are behind bars today because they are led to have. So if they can think about a coup in this condition, think about what will come when we defeat democracy as a working. So my fear, honestly, is that I see that Nigeria's democracy is failing fundamentally. And where democracy fails is when there are no more competition. Democracy does not promise that the best guys get elected, the good guys get elected. The minimum of democracy is that at any time the people feels like they can change government. And when that change is no longer possible, because those in power have bought over, captured, right word, the institutions that determine that process of voter selection of a different actors. When it's foreclosed, then they have also foreclosed the prospect of basic freedom and human rights, because essentially the basic rights include the rights to make the choice to vote or not to vote, to express choice between alternatives. So what we are walking into is where there's actually no alternative. And that's where INEC's role and the court's role are in focus. If INEC's shenanigans and all this, their cockot and paste, decision making, results in destroying ADC, destroying Labour Party, destroying PDP, and on Monday morning or Sunday evening, we are left with only President Tinubu and the APC as the only viable party. Today, they have taken over the National Assembly, largely. That's about 30 governors many governors have. And what is driving this defection? It's not anything. There's no magic. APC doesn't have a magic formula in managing their parties are better managed. All the parties are shambolic. But what is driving it is the politicians think there's no way out, that there or not you die. If we stay out, they rig us out. The courts are foreclosed. Go to court. The courts have since 2023, since before then, court has now a history of distrust. If you look at the Afrobarometer, the courts at INEC have about 75% to 80% distrust. That means 75 to 80% citizens say, we don't trust the judiciary. If you do that today, a new poll, you will discover that about 90% of Nigerians or more have no confidence in the judiciary, especially in election cases, with very clear evidence of corruption, report anecdotes of participants on how they bribe judges and all that. And of course, you don't have to go far. A Nigerian senator, a senior senator, openly said he arranged electoral victories elections for his colleagues through his wife. This is an open admission. So nobody can accuse you of scandalizing the judiciary if the actor says, I did it with my wife, who is the president of the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal has been a center of corruption in election cases. That presidency, whoever occupied that office, needs to have a moral profiling and look at their history, because they're the ones who comprise these cases. So we are getting to a point where the system is being rigged to create a sense of fait accompli. And when that happens, Nigeria is a very poor, volatile society. So imagine what sections of the country not in power would think about. So just imagine some people in the north say, oh, we are feeling cheated. And maybe they are fancying that at the poll, at the election, they could win. Some people in the southeast might say, oh, it's our turn. And they are fancying that maybe if we project our candidate, a candidate who is popular, and they work together, they win. Now, if those are foreclosed because elections are already rigged before you even start the process, what would they do? They will resort to violence. Violence is the only attractive process we are facing now. And that's why some of us are worried, not because of partisanship. We are worried that we are about losing our democracy because we are allowing politicians use their desperation for power use the power calculus to overshadow other calculus. We need to think about development calculus. We need to think about stability, how this country can be stable and rescued. And all this will require, in the minimum, that if you're going to follow democracy trajectory, if you're going to be a democracy, the minimum you require is a competitive election. And this is why some people say maybe dictatorships outperform democracy. So, China, the secret is very simple. If you're not a true democracy, you can't attain development. If you are a well-managed dictatorship, you can attain development. So if you put in a formula, you can say bad democracy is less than dictatorship. Good democracy better than dictatorship. So if you look at the world, the map of development in the world, the countries have made it with the Scandinavians, much of Europe, where the fundamentals of democracy are in practice, they get development. If you look at the other map, those who have made it, who may not be that democratic, maybe China, maybe South Korea under Lee Kuan Yew, under General Park. Now South Korea is a good democracy. Maybe Japan under the generals in 1925, 1925, when they started their miracle. Singapore, maybe under Lee Kuan Yew. What is common? That these were well-run developmental states that had rule of law, but probably didn't have votes, and there was no pretension. If you look at countries that are at the bottom of development ladder, there are countries that put a formality of democracy, but are neither democracies nor organized authoritarian governments. They are the worst in development index. So that is why today Nigeria is classified as electoral autocracy. So you're not even a democracy. And so my argument is that beyond the fact that the elections will be rigged in 2027, or seem to be being rigged, there's also a chaos element, mismanaged, ungoverned. INEC has not shown the rules, the Electoral Act, the time frame, everything points to massive failure. So together with the fact that the votes will be rigged, the fake results will be announced because the legislators work very hard to ensure that there's no real time, everything they did to make sure they create that possibility that somebody can cook the result and get it through the judicial process and say, the law says it doesn't have to be. I mean, this is just what they set up. So, but that apart, we're not faced with a different that you might end up with, even don't know who are the parties to vote for, who are the candidates. One legal scholar says, by getting back to Abacha's 5 leprous finger, you don't even have a candidate apart from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
All right, River State seems to have become the laboratory of political destruction in Nigeria. The FCT minister created the governor, SYMFONI, and then we saw how all the fights and then how he tried to destroy him. The Supreme Court intervened. Then federal might was deployed. For you, is what happened in Rivers the same template that President Tinubu intends to use against any governor that tries to step out of line?
I don't know whether you use the same template, but what I'd say is that there is obvious coercion, but also some degree of cowardice. I see, governors themselves, maybe because they're not confident of themselves, maybe because they're not confident of the electoral system, I think more so because of that, and they're not confident of the courts, that they are jittery, even when there's no cause to be jittery. Some of the ways governors try to appease Tinubu, even those governors who are still standing, some of them, their body language approach is too supine and condescending, that I know the fear of INEC and the fear of the court is the beginning of wisdom in Nigerian politics.
Well, let's wrap up this way. You said Nigeria will have the worst democracy in 2027 than we have today. That's death sentence on this republic. With this seeming reality, what's your advice to Nigerians going into 2027 elections?
To first realize that the signs are not good. To also understand that apart from God, everything is created. These are predictions based on scenario. If they change the scenario, if they change the game, they get different outcomes. So if Nigerians start getting more concerned about democracy surviving in Nigeria, less about the party, who wins. If Nigerians start thinking more around how do we ensure competitive, free, fair election and push on INEC, then I might be wrong. I would like to be proved false, to be a false prophet, so that in 2027 we have a better democracy. INEC conducts a less chaotic, less rigged, more transparent, more credible election. But from what I'm seeing, if we continue in this trend, the result is guaranteed.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.